disclaimer for this video. I am not a lawyer. So that means all the advice I'm giving here is based on a layman's interpretation of the law. In other words, what I'm saying is, research it on your own to some extent. And I'll put the links, or I won't put links, but I'll put the lists of the laws in the description so that way you can go Google them. So yeah, not my responsibility if you get caught with a knife and don't know what's legal or what's not, because no one really does. There's a reason lawyers spend 5 years in school, so that they can interpret all of this crap to the rest of us. And I'm not a lawyer. This is a layman's interpretation of the law. So, read it, make your own decision. But what I've given you is, at the very least, a shallow, well, I don't really want to say shallow, but what I've given you is a reasonably good interpretation of the text of the law. Granted, there might be court cases that find what I said completely wrong. You know, something's been found to mean something completely different. And I'm not sure. I haven't looked at court cases. There's a book called The Knife Laws of the 50 States, which I don't have, but I've heard very good things about it. It details what you can and cannot have, and it's all by law. Unfortunately, it was published in, I think, 2006, so it's not current. So what you probably want to do is read it, but then double check that the laws are still the same. And it has court cases that say, you know, what's legal and what isn't. So if you really want to make sure, get that, and because that guy's a lawyer, and read his book. I'm a complete cheapskate and didn't want to get the book, but I think they go for about $15 right now. You know, eBay, Amazon, that sort of place. So a common question that gets asked by a lot of people is, what knives are legal in Washington State? That's complicated because Washington has some of the most confusing knife laws out there. Well, maybe not most confusing, but pretty confusing, and a lot of people are confused. You know, so what knives are legal? Is this knife legal? Is this knife legal? What about this one? Which ones are legal and which aren't? And the law is not helpful on this, figuring out this task at all, because it's written in, well, terrible English, in my opinion. They could just say, oh, this knife's illegal and this one isn't, but rather than doing that, no, they write it in very convoluted and very stupid ways. So Washington State itself has no length limit on knives. The only thing you aren't allowed to do is conceal carry a deadly weapon, which I guess this would probably qualify, although they don't really define what a deadly weapon is, so it's kind of questionable what you can conceal and what you can't under just the Washington State law, because they don't define deadly weapon, and not defining deadly weapon means you could pretty much define anything as a deadly weapon. Hell, I could probably kill someone with this thing, but I don't think they call it a deadly weapon. Whereas if you're carrying this, I almost guarantee they would call that a deadly weapon, even though actually I'll bet, depending on how good you are with blunt weapons, you could probably kill someone with that chunk of metal over there easier, or a screwdriver. But, you know, whatever. Now, there is a small piece of Washington code that defines what a deadly weapon is that felons are not allowed to carry. And that's defined, but only for that section, that any knife over 3 inches is considered a deadly weapon and felons aren't allowed to have it. However, that only says for that section. But, so you probably won't be able to use that with police officers, but if you ever get hauled into court saying that this is a deadly weapon, you can easily say, no, it's not. Felons can have it, and it's under 3 inches. It can't be a deadly weapon. So you're pretty much safe in Washington State concealing any knife under 3 inches. There's really no other. If they're going to let felons do it, why can't you? At least that's my opinion. The other Washington State law is a ban on spring blade knives, which they define extremely broadly to include anything that is automatically released by a spring mechanism, any knife having a blade which opens or falls or is ejected into position by the force of gravity, and any knife that is opened by an outward, downward, or centrifugal thrust or movement. The exception they give to that law is that if it has a bias towards being closed that requires force be applied to the blade to release it, means it's not a spring blade knife. So this knife, even though it really looks like a spring blade, because this piece here is specifically a part of the blade, and you put it here, so you're pressing on the blade, it's legally not a spring blade knife. If you could open it just by going like that, well, actually then it wouldn't technically be a centrifugal knife either, but it could be a gravity knife. Anyway, this is legal because you're pressing on the blade to do it. Finicky bit is, are butterfly knives legal or not? Now, that's a touchy subject because centrifugal knife, or centrifugal knife I should say, right, there's multiple pronunciations, would seem to say, no, it's illegal, and it's a gross misdemeanor if you have one. However, centrifugal force is the force that pushes objects away from the center of rotation. If you've ever been on like a merry-go-round or whatever, like on schoolyards, they spin, the force that's making you try and fly away from the center, that's centrifugal force. However, you never use that with a butterfly knife, do you? You just rotate it around the center of rotation. You're never pushing the blade out or anything. You're not deploying the blade with centrifugal force. You're just rotating parts of the knife around the center of rotation. You're not using the centrifugal force at all. Now, granted, I'll bet you a police officer would disagree with you, and you'd probably get a big fine. But if you wanted to fight it in court, that argument could get you out of it. So in my opinion, while not okay to have a butterfly knife, it is probably legal. If you went to court, you could probably get out of a fine, but it's still questionable, because I think it's what they mean by a centrifugal knife is a knife with a handle and a blade inside of it, and when you fling it like that, the blade slides out and deploys and locks. Because I've seen those. And those seem to be what they're trying to ban. Now, the next part of Washington's law is that cities are allowed to have their own laws, which can be very confusing because, of course, city laws can be different. Now, as far as I know, the only cities that have specific knife laws are Vancouver and Seattle. Now, their knife laws don't actually make any knives specifically illegal, they just have to do with what you can concealed carry. In Vancouver, any dangerous knife is a knife that's over 3 inches or is a fixed blade knife. So this blade here, which is over 3 inches, you could not conceal. That's illegal. Once again, I believe it's a gross misdemeanor. On the other hand, this knife here is a 3-inch blade, so you can conceal it in Vancouver. They don't disallow carry. You can carry a gigantic sword if you want to, as long as it's open carry. That's the big difference, is you can't concealed carry it. Now, if it's fixed blade of any kind, you have to open carry it. Although they make a whole bunch of exceptions for, like, if you're hunting, or you just bought it, or if it's in a sealed wrapper, or pretty much you could probably make the case that you're exempt from the law almost all the time, because maybe you're on your way to hunting, you know. Or at the very least, you could claim that afterwards. You know, I was going to hunt, but then, like, the officer decided, no, I had to, like, go to court or something. Now, Seattle is a little bit leaner, or lenienter, that's not a word, is it? I don't know. Anyway, Seattle's a little bit lenienter. They do not, they consider a deadly knife to be any knife over 3.5 inches or fixed blade, or folding knife over 3.5 inches or fixed blade. So, these knives are still legal. Extra legal, in fact, because they're under the limit. You can have a 3.5-inch folding blade in Seattle. However, even if this wasn't a butterfly knife, this is over 3.5 inches on this blade, so you could not conceal it. So that's pretty much all the knife laws in Washington State. And Washington don't conceal a deadly weapon, although Washington State itself has no limits on what you can and cannot carry. Vancouver does. Don't conceal carry anything that folds and is over 3 inches or is a fixed blade knife, so don't put your kitchen knife in your pocket. That's illegal. Seattle is the same, only theirs is 3.5 inch for folders. Now, more reasons why I think that these laws are kind of stupid is that this is, you know, punishable by possibly a gross misdemeanor. But if you ever get hauled into court about it, I would suggest bringing along some gigantic Bowie knife or something and say, look, this one's illegal, and this Bowie knife over here isn't. Why? And you could probably make the case that the laws are kind of stupid about it, that it should purely be about knife laws. I mean, seriously, if you're being stabbed, do you care that it's a butterfly knife stabbing you? You know, you could be stabbed by any kind of knife, and it's probably going to hurt you just about as much if the knife like this is. Whereas how you open the knife, I mean, seriously, why does that matter? If you're being stabbed, why do you care? In my opinion, Balisongs and butterfly knives, Balisongs or butterfly knives, were banned specifically because they're cool. Because they were cool, gangs used them. And since the gangs used them, everyone thought, oh, well, let's go ahead and ban. Sorry, I just got this knife. I'm not very good with it yet. It's a lot stiffer than I'm used to. Anyways, they decided that, oh, well, if we ban the Balisongs, that means that all the gangs won't have weapons. Well, no. You ban the Balisongs, A, they don't care. B, if they do, they're going to go and get a better knife. I mean, seriously, wouldn't you rather have the gangs having a knife like this where they might accidentally cut themselves? Or would you prefer them to have, like, I don't know, a 6-inch version of this that's spring-assisted? I would bet that would be a much worse thing for them to have. But that's what they all went to when they banned Balisongs. Anyways, I'm venting now, aren't I? So that's the thing in Washington. Balisongs, questionably legal or not, kind of depends on how much you're willing to risk. I personally would say keep it at home in Washington State at all times, and don't get caught with it in public, because, well, you'd probably win in court. You won't win in just like a conversation with a police officer. There's no way. Well, I mean, people get arrested for like obeying the law with guns. There's no way they do something that's borderline legal. Yeah, if you want to have a really like, I don't know, I guess like nasty knives, get a flipper like this, because those are just kind of cool. I mean, they work just like a spring blade effectively. I mean, there's no spring, but they open like they have one. Random topic is I really like this Buck Vantage. I think that's an excellent flipping knife. S30V steel, G10 handles, great knife. Completely unrelated to the topic, but whatever. So if you're in Vancouver and Seattle, don't conceal a knife. Actually, just generally, I would say don't conceal your knives. And Washington doesn't say if a pocket clip is concealed or not. It doesn't mention it at all. So it could very well be argued that having a pocket clip, even with, like, I don't know, you know, that much of it showing, that could be considered concealed. It's questionable. Plus your shirt might go over it. So just open carry it. I mean, no one really cares. Well, Vancouver, they don't really care. I've never had a problem. Seattle, I don't go up there very much. But, you know, I mean, crossing the river into Washington, I have to know all this crap. But, I mean, Oregon's like the greatest state nearly in terms of knife laws. I mean, you can, I think, not positive, I think you can conceal carry Balisongs, but I'm not positive. Forgive my bad Balisong flipping. I need to oil this. I just got it today. Seriously, I mean, it's quite stiff. I mean, it's kind of slow. But, so, that's the summary of the knife laws on Washington State, since I found resources on the topic very, very hard to find.